Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire supported by Glendivid Books. Does the resignation and defection of 11 MLAs and 3 ministers from the BJP in UP suggest that something far more important is happening subterraneously? That's the key issue I shall explore today with one of India's foremost political analysts, the author of highly regarded books on Narendra Modi, the RSS and the Ayodhya demolition, Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay. Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, in an article that you wrote for the Economic Times yesterday about the resignation and defection of 11 MLAs, including 3 ministers from the BJP in UP, you said, and I think I'm correctly quoting you, the departure of these leaders indicates their belief that their future will be more secure by breaking with the BJP. And this is because you thought a strong anti-incumbent sentiment now prevails in UP. Tell me more about that sentiment.
In India, politicians are with parties only partially for ideological reasons. More so, after having joined politics, they are there for their own survival, especially after becoming a legislator. They want to continue being that for the rest of their life. So, prior to elections, you always have this situation where people decide that whether I am going to be renominated, whether I am going to win the election if I am renominated. So while in 2017 and even before 2014, we saw this huge influx from other parties into the BJP, this time we are seeing a reverse movement, that people are leaving the BJP because they possibly feel that we are not going to benefit by staying in the party, that the trend is against the party. So it obviously indicates that the people who are leaving, these are seasoned politicians who are there just to stay in politics. They think that there isn't enough for them within the BJP, that their survival will be at stake if they continue being in the BJP. So they sense a huge anti-incumbent sentiment against the BJP, especially in UP at the moment. That's it. That's what is.
Did you believe that the memories of the trauma that devastated the country during the second wave in April, May of last year, and the pretty incompetent handling by the UP government, those memories haven't dimmed, and that when people vote in UP, they could be influenced by that? Is that therefore one reason why there is anti-incumbency growing in UP?
In May and June last year, I was fairly certain that there is going to be a huge sentiment against the government, not just in UP but everywhere else in the entire country, because of the complete ineptitude of the government in handling the second wave of the pandemic, especially in UP with the kind of the tragedy that we saw over people not being able to cremate the deceased. But then because of the advertisement blitzkrieg of the centre as well as the UP government, it appeared that these memories were receding, that Indians are inherently fatalistic, that it was in our bhagya, it was in our fate, that what could Modi have done, any other prime minister would have, or the chief minister would have handled it in the same way. But with the return of the third wave, it has still not yet gone into the hinterland in Uttar Pradesh. It has just about started going beyond the major metros. So my sense is that these leaders feel that this particular wave is going to revive the trauma and the memories of the second wave, and that is among the issues which is actually leading to the rise of an anti-incumbent sentiment and their movement from outside, from the BJP to other parties.
As you said, Omicron is now transitioning from the metros into the hinterlands. That's and right. From the hinterlands it will go even further into rural India, which means that as the campaign and the voting begins, it will be going deeper and deeper into UP. And therefore the memories that it will revive of the trauma of last year will be at their peak just as voting begins to happen. This is the fear in people's minds, and this is why they're leaving the BJP.
Yes, that is, if you actually try to look at it in terms of the distance, Western UP, which goes to vote in the first phase, that is closest to Delhi, which has already seen a fairly huge rise of Omicron cases. I stay in Ghaziabad, just bordering Delhi, where there aren't yet so many travel restrictions like in Delhi. Ghaziabad is, the cases are beginning to rise in Ghaziabad and Noida. I am sure that it is going to go towards the other parts of Western UP. over the next few days, and before the 10th of February, it is quite likely that it would be fairly alarming situation that would revive, is the government doing enough, did it do enough?
And that is the fear in the minds of the MLAs and ministers, that BJP's image will once again be sinking, because memories of the way it mishandled the last wave will be back at people's minds, because there's a third wave happening. So fear and concern will drive them to vote away from the BJP.
It would add to the reasons for them not to vote for the BJP, because there are other issues, most importantly the caste equation and the reality that you have had a Rajput chief minister in Uttar Pradesh. There are all kinds of issues which are there. There's a talk of Rajput hegemony in Uttar Pradesh, which has seen a return after VP Singh.
I want very much to come to the other reasons in a moment's time, but what I want to clarify first is that on top of all the other reasons that are perhaps there in the background as anti-incumbency against the BJP, now will be the revival of the fear of COVID, with the Omicron wave escalating and bringing those memories back. So that is, in a sense, if I can misuse the phrase, the cherry at the top of everything else.
I think so. That is quite likely that if the handling of the Omicron does not go very well, then it is going to make things worse for the government, for the BJP. The best that they could do at this stage is to try to hope that the management of the Omicron is good, and also that this particular wave is not very severe and catastrophic.
Let's come to the other reasons, because in your article for the Economic Times, you do also identify one more factor that adds to the anti-incumbency in UP. And it's what you call the wrath of the farmers, which is perhaps at its angriest in Western UP. Does that suggest that the hope the BJP had that by repealing the farm laws, they would have assuaged this anger, that hope has not been realized?
I think Mr. Modi made this fundamental error of repealing the farm laws too late, because then it actually, very close to the elections, it actually meant that he had finally been able to see what was there written on the wall for the last 1 year. It was very clear from the beginning that this was a movement which could not be defamed, that there was widespread support, not just for the movement. The anger was not just with the laws, but the manner in which the laws were enacted. There was a certain amount of riding over people's shoulders, going roughshod over people. That is something which the people of this area, especially Western UP and even in adjoining Haryana and Punjab, they do not like. They want to be consulted. There is a history.
This element of anti-incumbency, which is as a result of the farm laws, is that limited to Western UP, or does it work its way right through the state?
It's at its highest in Western UP. Then it starts receding as you move towards the east. If we actually look at Uttar Pradesh, not as just a north-south geographical region, but as a west to east. Starting from Saharanpur and then going up to all the way up to Ghazipur, Gorakhpur. So it will keep on receding. Possibly it will get completely diminished by the time it reaches Lucknow, where other factors will come in, which we will possibly be talking about. But the anger over enacting the farm laws without consulting the farmers and being insistent on not repealing the laws for 1 year, I think it is going to cost very heavily for the BJP.
The idea that I'm getting as you speak is that in Western UP, which is adjacent to Delhi, not only will there be anti-incumbency of a fairly substantial amount because of the farm laws, but if the Omicron wave, as everyone expects, starts moving into UP via Western UP, then the fear and the trauma and the memories of last year will also be paramount. And therefore, in Western UP, the BJP's position is becoming increasingly more difficult and awkward.
It has become very difficult for the BJP, and if you actually speak around to the BJP workers and the junior level workers, they've almost written off Western UP, if I can actually use such a harsh phrase.
The BJP workers have virtually written off.
They're just hopeful of a few seats here and there, but otherwise they also sense this huge consolidation. They actually won. Let me take you back to 2014, 17 and 19. They actually swept through Western UP primarily because of a massive communal polarization. But for the last year and a half, we have seen that the farmers, the Jats and the Muslims, not being in such an animated stage, going at each other's throats. And the Muslims were very much present within the farmers' movement also, though it was led by the Jats. There is, the temperature, communal temperature in this region has definitely come down, and this is going to be to a huge disadvantage for the BJP.
And as you say, if the BJP's own workers, and they may not be saying this publicly, but if internally they believe they'll just win a handful of seats in Western UP and not the rest, that is a huge loss for the BJP.
Because this, as a region, this is a very significant region. And there is something very significant, which I keep telling people. Sanjeev Balyan, in one of the conversations with me, he was a very important leader and he's also a minister in the union government. He had once very proudly boasted, कि हवा पश्चिम से चलती है. So if the trend against the BJP starts blowing from the west to the east, then I do not know where the BJP is actually going to fall.
And this also explains something that was speculated, it was never confirmed, that this time around the BJP did not want the UP elections to start in the west, they would have preferred it to start in the east. So that the hawa that blows is the other way around. But because it's starting in the west, the wrong hawa may start. And that's another concern for them.
That would be. In fact, there were reports in the media that the BJP had lobbied with the Election Commission for the elections to start from the east to west. Go back to pre-2014 trend, that is what used to happen. In 2012, for instance, it was not actually directly linear from the west to the east, but the Election Commission, I think, for security and other logistic reasons, decided to follow the same sequence of 2014, 17 and 19.
And this is why the BJP was lobbying for a change this time.
Exactly.
Because they sense that the hawa that starts in the west may not be the hawa they want to spread across the state. Both because the farm law agitation remains, the communalization has dipped, and now the fear of Omicron and the revival of the memories of last year's wave will also work against them. The combination from Western UP is not favorable to them.
That's right. Can I just add one thing? When they were lobbying with the Election Commission that let's start the elections this time from the east, they were not aware that there are going to be such a huge wave of desertions from the BJP, a large number of them from the east. So I am not very sure if east to west would have also worked for the BJP.
Let's now come at this point to the caste equations that underlie these wave of resignations and defections. I notice that at least 9 of the 11 MLAs and MPs MLAs and ministers who've left the BJP are non-Yadav OBCs. Does that suggest that the very careful non-Yadav vote bank that the BJP had built up might be showing signs of cracking?
From the early 1990s, the BJP tried to make inroads into the OBCs, not with great success. Kalyan Singh, let me remind you, was an OBC, and the BJP which was essentially what we call a Savarn party, which is dominated by the upper caste traditionally, the Baniya, and the Brahmins initially were not with the BJP. They came in through the Ram Janmabhoomi agitation, became supporters of the BJP because of that. From that time, they kept on trying, but somehow or the other did not really work out because they did not get the right tactics. In 2013, when Mr. Modi put Amit Shah in charge of reviving a completely moribund party organization together, he, along with several other leaders, identified that we could actually peck at the non-dominant communities among both the OBCs as well as the Dalits. When we say that non-dominant communities, meaning that numerically, if you look at UP, out of an approximate 40% of OBCs, the largest group are the Yadavs. So naturally, when the benefits came as a result of mandalization, the bulk of it was garnered by the Yadavs. So the others were a bit disgruntled. So they decided to follow the same tactics which was followed by Nitish Kumar in Bihar, and identified that even though we might not call them MBCs, but yes, there is the existence
what
of
you're talking about is
non-Yadav
OBCs and
OBCs.
non-Jatav Dalits.
Exactly.
But this is the point I'm making. If 9 of the 11 who've left the BJP in the last 10 days are non-Yadav OBCs, does that suggest that the non-Yadav vote bank is cracking?
Definitely it is cracking, and what I see is very early signs, still very early signs of the kind of consolidation against the BJP which happened in 2015 in Bihar. You might
You
remember
see signs of that
that
happening in UP?
I see a very early signs. It still has to be maintained that when Nitish Kumar and Lalu Yadav came together, at that point, the Yadavs and the non-Yadav OBCs, they all came together along with the Muslims.
This, in a sense, is what Swami Prasad Maurya is hinting at when he says,
Exactly.
"Ke aur bhi aayenge."
Yes, that is what yesterday he said, that it's not 80-20 in their favor as Yogi
85-15 in ours.
85 to 15 in ours. And when he's saying 85 to 15, out of the 20% upper caste, approximately, we are talking approximate numbers, because we have not had a caste census despite demands from the people. So even from there is a desertion from the upper caste also, because of what is called Rajput hegemony in Uttar Pradesh.
Absolutely, and this is what I was going to put you. If on the one hand, and I think I'm correctly quoting the 2019-2020 National Family Health Survey, the OBC population of UP is estimated at 50%. And if this non-Yadav vote bank that the BJP has nurtured and created is cracking, and side by side, the anguish or anger of the Brahmins remains unappeased because they are resentful of Yogi Adityanath's pro-Rajput politics, then the combination is a pretty worrying one for the BJP. The Brahmins are angry and the non-Yadav OBC platform is cracking. The combination is very worrying for them.
Very worrying, and in fact, there is definitely a long time, for which the Brahmins have drifted away. They came back in 2019 because it was the parliamentary elections. Their anger is primarily directed at Yogi Adityanath, starting with the Saharanpur incident, which you might remember, which happened after just a few months of Yogi Adityanath becoming chief minister. The process of the desertions of the Dalits started happening around that time. And the moment it happened, because it was the Rajput dominance which came back to Uttar Pradesh. He was the first Rajput chief minister after a long, long time.
And he's very much the face of the BJP campaign this time. And so there's no question that there's going to be a change in chief minister. He's being projected as the future chief minister again.
No, I think we have enough indications to think, to assess that throughout 2021, the central leadership of the BJP tried to rein in Yogi Adityanath but failed. Let me remind you that there was a very senior bureaucrat in the Prime Minister's office who took premature retirement, became a member of the Legislative Council. There was speculation that he is going to be...
But his rise was thwarted.
Yeah.
So this is the point I'm making. If the Brahmin anguish against the BJP is focused on Yogi Adityanath's pro-Rajput politics, then their concern will grow, because once again, it's quite clear that if the BJP wins, Adityanath will continue as chief minister. And the likelihood of the same pro-Rajput politics continuing is also going to be there. So Brahmin anguish will continue. And now on side by side, you've got the non-Yadav OBC platform cracking. So is this what you mean about a consolidation against the BJP? For different reasons, different castes have very good grounds for not wanting the BJP back.
True, absolutely true. And the BJP has been aware of the fact that the Brahmins are dissatisfied. They put Jitin Prasad in the UP ministry. It happened in September, as late as that. Possibly too late to actually appease the Brahmins and get them back. And also the fact that the personality of Yogi Adityanath is actually very domineering, and he's actually not allowed any elbow room to any other leader.
So you really do believe that there is a potential for this consolidation against the BJP to grow?
True. I actually think that at the moment there would be enough reasons for the BJP to be extremely worried in Uttar Pradesh.
Let me then toss another thought to you. The non-Yadav OBC platform was constructed by the BJP as part of its Hindutva appeal. They were appealing to all of these as fellow Hindus. Now, writing in the Hindustan Times yesterday, Sunita Aron says that if these resignations and defections are happening, then it suggests that the BJP's Hindu platform may also be cracking. Would you agree with her and go that far?
Well, if the caste platform is cracking, then it is obviously because their strategy of Hindu consolidation is not working. Hindu consolidation has always been the only way in which the BJP has been able to respond to the caste fragmentation.
So the reassertion of non-OBC castes non-Yadav caste means that the Hindu platform is cracking.
Yes, it is cracking. We are back to what used to be called the Mandal versus Kamandal, that VP Singh's decision to implement the Mandal Commission way back in 1990, which led to Advani taking out his first Rath Yatra. That is the basic thing, that the only way you can ensure that the caste fragmentation can be countered is by uniting all Hindu caste across caste lines on religious lines. That is why a very significant speech by Mr. Modi at Varanasi, we're talking about the Sanatan Dharma appeal. This is the first time you actually have seen people appealing in the name of Sanatan Dharma in the hope that everyone who identifies himself as or herself as a Hindu would come on the same plank, forgetting their caste.
Absolutely. And now if after that, and it's interesting, it's happened 2 weeks after that or just 3 weeks after that,
right,
sizable numbers of MLAs and ministers are deserting on caste lines from the BJP, then as you say, Mandal versus Kamandal is once again manifesting itself, and the Sanatan Dharma appeal is being vitiated because people are now turning around and saying, you did nothing for my caste, and it's their caste identity that they're asserting, not the Hindu platform that the BJP tried to unite them on.
People are also arguing that if you are actually talking so highly about Sanatan Dharma, then you also have to talk about the egalitarianism of Sanatan Dharma. Where has there been any egalitarian approach?
And that's a question the BJP
yes,
does not want to ask.
Yes, exactly.
So this is a combination of things that are happening in UP that work against the BJP's interest. The fear of Omicron, which in turn revives memories of the second wave and the incompetent handling of the second wave. The farmers' distress and anger, and then the fracturing on top of that of the BJP non-Yadav platform and the reassertion of caste identities and the failure to unite them on a Hindu platform. All of this is very worrying.
Extremely, it is all worrying. Besides this, there is another very important factor, which I'm sure that we
Please
will
tell me,
about,
tell me.
Which is essentially this unspoken fault line which exists between the state leadership led by Yogi Adityanath and the central leadership of the BJP, that is the Narendra Modi, Amit Shah combined.
You mean to say that Narendra Modi and Amit Shah are not completely backing Yogi, even though all the advertisements and the speeches by the Prime Minister suggest they are? There are differences between them, which mean that the full support from the center for the Yogi government doesn't exist.
No, let me put it this way, that instead of straight away answering your question and looking at it in a black and white terms, in Uttar Pradesh, there has been a different model of relationship between the state government and the center than what exists with other BJP-ruled states. We have seen in Yogi Adityanath, we have seen, I've used this word in the article, he's been a more autonomous chief minister than the other rubber stamp chief ministers of the BJP states. So in this, what we have seen is that Uttar Pradesh is the only BJP ruled state where the chief minister has built an identity independent of the central leadership. The campaign also by Yogi Adityanath after the second wave was essentially about promoting the face of Yogi Adityanath. He definitely has ambitions which have become visible, and I am not very
sure. But complete your thought. Are you suggesting that therefore if there were to be a BJP defeat, Mr. Shah and Mr. Modi may not be quite as upset as we think? They would have got a rival out of the way.
Well, that is a nice way of putting it, that a defeat would not really harm the narrative for 2024 because you still have 2 years, but somebody who can potentially throw his hat in the ring prior to 2024
would have been eliminated.
Yes, has lost face, has been held responsible.
This may not be appropriate, but a defeat in UP could be a blessing in disguise when viewed from the Delhi point of view.
Yes, but it gets also linked to the fact that there are other factors, including the performance of the government, anti-incumbent sentiment, handling of the COVID pandemic, for all of which the center would also be held responsible.
Absolutely.
So it is also going to affect the narrative for 2024. So what I look at it, the way I look at it is that the central leadership is in a bit of a spot, because if you lose UP, it is also going to affect the narrative for 2024.
Let's come back to your Economic Times article, because you say there, and I'm quoting you, if disaffection against the state government's handling of the pandemic does lie at the root of the cracks in the BJP social coalition, it would take a Herculean effort or an overnight twist, like post-Pulwama, to allow the BJP to breathe easy in the path to 2024. Right. So you're clearly suggesting there that the cracks that we're talking about in UP could also cause serious tremors in Delhi.
I definitely think so. Why this reference to Pulwama? Let me take you back to what we used to discuss in 2018, especially after the victory of the Congress in Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, in the assembly elections. The BJP was in a very tight spot. That is the time when in late January, Rahul Gandhi came out and announced his, that Nyaya scheme. I remember I was on your show on several occasions at that particular time, and we said that the BJP is in huge trouble. But then came the terrorist attack in Pulwama, which was, in reaction to which Mr. Modi, launched strikes on Pakistan.
He brought nationalism back to the fore, and he brought anti-Pakistan sentiment back to the fore.
So yes, so all the issues of performance receded into the background, and it became a hyper nationalistic election. That is what came to the fore. And once again, Hindu consolidation work. The Brahmins came back to the BJP in
all
Uttar
of that,
Pradesh
that's
also.
Are you saying now that if UP gets lost because these cracks widen and become fissures, Mr. Modi will need something like Pulwama to save him in 2024?
I'm not saying exactly like Pulwama. You can't have the same thing.
But there's something that changes the picture in the same way.
Something which enables him to completely change the direction of the political narrative, the way he was able to do it after Pulwama.
In other words, it will be a desperate situation needing a desperate remedy.
Exactly. As it is, as far as security is concerned, we have had this huge unanswered questions regarding China.
China, of course, is a very different opponent for India compared to Pakistan.
It also does not resonate so hugely with the people.
Quite right.
For other reasons.
Is disproportionately stronger than Pakistan, and needling China is very different to needling Pakistan.
You can't just whip up rhetoric against China in India.
Which also means that the loss of UP will create a particularly difficult situation for Mr. Modi, because not only will he need a desperate remedy to salvage him, but that may not be that easy to find this time around.
Yes, I think so. It's quite worrying a situation, not just regarding UP, but also the consequences of a defeat in UP could also be very heavy on the center.
Let's come back to the situation that looks as if it's likely to develop in UP between now and the end of the polls, the last voting for which will be somewhere around the 7th of March. Do you believe that, given what we're talking about, the ground wobbling under the feet of the BJP, fissures appearing, right? Some leading even to earthquakes. Do you believe that the BJP's response will be to magnify its Hindu appeal and seek to once again polarize UP and garner Hindu votes? Because in a sense, when Yogi Adityanath talks about 80 versus 20%, this is what he's clearly suggesting.
This is what he's clearly suggesting when Amit Shah says that his cavalcade got blocked on a highway, and then he inquired why was it. People said that today is Friday, so obviously it would be. So you are bringing in multiple devices, but besides communal polarization, I think the BJP is also going to play up hugely what they call the labhartis, or the beneficiaries of the various social welfare schemes which have been started by the Modi government.
That won't divide the country, but the anti-Muslim rhetoric, 80 versus 20%, right? That will clearly communalize UP more. Or the intent is to do so.
That is the basic purpose. If you communalize UP more, then you ensure that caste fissures are pushed into the background. Then the SP Mauryas get neutralized, because people would then be more driven by their anti-Muslim sentiment than by their support for leaders like SP Maurya and others.
In which case, let me ask you, because you know UP, what are the chances that the BJP will succeed in communalizing UP and thus consolidating the Hindu vote and undermining the caste fissures we are discussing? Or are all the other factors that make for anti-sentiment so strongly established that this time round the Hindu appeal may not work?
It is very difficult to say that what would happen between now and the 7th of March, that is the last phase of elections. Last time also in 2017, there was a background of communal polarization in Western UP, but it started on a fairly sedate note, not very highly surcharged. But then suddenly, midway through the campaign, Mr. Modi came up with his Shamshan Ghat and Kabristan rhetoric. And that is what changed the entire campaigning in 2017.
So what's going to happen this time?
We really do not know that what the BJP is going to come up with, what the Samajwadi Party is going to come up with. We also have to accept the fact that at least as far as, this is my personal assessment, I'm sure that many people would disagree. I think that as far as managing campaigning is concerned, the BJP is smarter than the Samajwadi Party.
So in other words, what you're also saying is that we don't know whether any attempt made by the BJP to recover lost ground by magnifying its Hindu appeal will work or not. As yet, we have to simply wait and see.
Definitely we have to wait and see, because
we agree on two things. One, that the ground under the BJP is wobbling and cracks and fissures are appearing. And the second thing we agree on is that the BJP's likely recourse will be to magnify the Hindu appeal. What we don't know is whether that recourse, magnifying the Hindu appeal, will be sufficient to solidify the ground that's cracking. That is what we don't know as yet.
Exactly true, but what I'm saying is that this beneficiaries is also going to be tom-tommed heavily, because they're going to say that the people who have benefited the most under these beneficiary schemes, various all other schemes, making toilets, making houses,
are the
OBCs, are the Dalits.
Except if the non-Yadav OBC vote bank is cracking, it's cracking because the people don't believe that the benefits they've got are sufficient to keep them loyal to the BJP. That's something they know about already.
Yes, it's very difficult, but I guess at the moment the BJP does not have very many options but to play up these two, because
that's another sign of the BJP's desperation.
Yes,
right? Exactly. Their options are not very many, and as you're suggesting, they're not very good either.
No, not at all. It's
my last question. Clearly, these resignations and defections, most of whom are heading towards the Samajwadi Party, will strengthen Akhilesh Yadav's hand, and it will also, in a sense, improve his image. But does he have an alternate vision to offer UP in contrast to the BJP, or is he primarily relying on a sort of rainbow coalition of castes?
So far, he's not revealed what is his alternate vision for the development of Uttar Pradesh. I do not know if between now and the 10th of February, when the first phase of
free power is the only thing he's spoken about. Free power.
Yeah, besides that, part of it has already been implemented by the Uttar Pradesh government. So we really do not know that what is his vision, except these freebies. What he is definitely banking on is some, self goals by the BJP, the cracks which have already appeared, the caste consolidation which is happening. So essentially, he is looking for a negative verdict against the BJP to get him back into
power. My last question, does it matter that he may not be able to come up with something positive so that people vote for the Samajwadi rather than vote against the BJP? Or does it not matter?
There have been instances in the past when people are not really bothered that who will come, what will he do, or what will she do. They just want this government out. I am not very sure that whether that stage has been reached in Uttar Pradesh, but unless the BJP is able to come up with something, it might actually boil down to that.
But the interesting thing, and this is my last question, is that this discussion has shown that the resignations and defections we've seen, and there may be more of them, we just don't know, clearly suggest that if you look deeper, the ground is wobbling, cracks and fissures are emerging, and the earth is shaking in a way the BJP is not too happy with.
I think you have put it brilliantly. I don't have to add a word to it.
But it also means, doesn't it then, that the churn and turmoil in UP will progressively get worse and worse as we get closer to voting. And it also possibly suggests that the outcome of that voting could be quite a surprise.
Could be quite a surprise. And whether whether the BJP is able to stabilize, what is happening and make things better would also depend on the manner in which they are able to resolve issues which are going to surely come up within the party as far as ticket distribution is concerned.
In other words, everything is for play, and in UP at least, we can't with any confidence say it's a definite BJP victory again.
Certainly, we cannot say that, and I would not say that this is what is going to happen in Uttar Pradesh.
Absolutely,
but
we just don't know.
definitely, BJP is definitely jittery at this stage, and the Samajwadi Party, as of today, is definitely feeling sufficient reasons to feel very confident.
Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, thank you very much for this eye-opening analysis.
Thank you.
Take care, stay safe.
Thank you.